Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Thank you for joining me for part 2 of the my least favorite LJN tournament. And so there were actually some very surprising picks in the last video. Jimmy Snuka, obviously, I felt was like a shoo-in to move on to the next round for least favorite. The Macho Man figure was kind of a toss-up. Ricky Steamboat. That one was, again, another kind of one of those toss-ups. And Steve Williams, oddly enough, I liked the other figure just a little bit better. I think it was Paul Orndorff, if I recall correctly. And so we're going to pretty much just dive right into the next set of matches. Again, we are going to stick with 4 matchups per video. That's going to be 8 characters, meaning we'll be done with round 1 in 4 videos. So, as we dive in for today's matchup, we've got Jesse Ventura, and he is going to square off against Shinjo. Next one is going to feature Ric Flair Red, and he is going to square off against Mike Sharp. Alright, this one is Ivan Putski, and he will square off against Roddy Piper. And the last matchup is going to be Tito Santana Purple, and he will square off against Bob Backlund. Ooh. You know why that one is a hard one? Is because both of those figures are absolute trash. Like, literally, either one of those two characters, either one of those two figures could win the worst LJN figure of all time type of deal. I don't know who I'm going to choose. That one's hard. It really is. Alright, guys, I am going to pause and go ahead and get those figures pulled, and I will be back in a split second. Alright, everyone. Thank you for waiting. I know. All that 0.2 seconds. Alright, so, first matchup we said was Jesse Ventura versus Shinjo. Now, I'm actually going to start with Shinjo. And you will actually see both Shinjo and Hakushi both on this list. And it was tough to put either of those characters on this list. Why? Because they came from Raider Nation. And I love the Raider Nation custom figures that are done by Kenny Lester. I had seen the tandem of Manager Shinjo, Wrestler Hakushi for the longest time, and eventually I finally made an offer and purchased the item. The only reason that you're going to find either character on this list is 1, paint job, and 2, maybe the character who they're based off of. So, I don't mind the Mr. Fuji at all. That's not an issue with me. Simply put, he is an all-white figure. And there really isn't anything added to this. Yeah, I could look at this and say, oh, he is just Fuji. What else do I got out of it? There's nothing. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is his exact outfit there, so you can't complain about that. But I like a little color separation here and there, and for that purpose and that purpose only, I mean, to me, that's a very simple excuse for this type of figure, because Mr. Fuji figure in general is not a bad figure. One of the better managers, obviously. he just fails in that regard. And Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura is arguably one of the worst figures, and he is part of this tournament for one main reason. No, you were not going to see Demolition Axe on this, or the Smash counterpart, which is mirrored. At least with the Demolition, you've got awesome detail to the figure. I mean, what is it? Your headband, your pink pants. I mean, it's a very simple figure. Nothing's flashy, nothing super spectacular about this. I mean, it's if this hand was positioned the right way, like if he had like a Greg Valentine pose with his right hand up like this, maybe the left arm is out kind of like a little bit more, maybe it'd be a much more playable figure, be a much more enjoyable figure. But this little posing that he does, muscle pose and whatnot, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And why did they do the same thing with Demolition? It killed me. So I think this first matchup is going to be really quick. I think Jesse Ventura is going to win to move on to round 2. I think he is a far worse figure. Like I said, not a bad figure. It looks exactly like who he's supposed to be mimicked after. It's just not a lot of detail. But at least we can say Shinjo, thank God, is not the worst LJN ever made. And I knew he wouldn't be. I mean, there's a lot of characters, a lot of figures I put on this list that I basically did so because I really didn't have a lot of choices. Because there are just so many phenomenal figures, custom-wise, and even from the original LJN line, that you don't want to put them anywhere near a subject saying worst anything. So, Shinjo is safe. And he will continue on to round 2 as the worst, as in competition for the worst figure. Next one up was Ric Flair Red and Iron Mike Sharp. So we will start with Ric Flair. Now this one I actually bought from Nathan over at what is it, Ohio? It's Ohio Collectibles. I bought from him a gazillion times, and I can't even remember what it's called. All I remember is the Ohio part. And I actually did a short where I talked about who did it best. And we looked at, the Galoob 2-Up from Man and Treasures, Blue Trunks Ric Flair. We looked at, I know I had 3 figures. There's obviously this one, and I'm trying to think, what was the other one? Because I didn't have the big rubber guys, Ric Flair, in yet, so. But I could have sworn I had a 3rd figure. I'm thinking. Oh, from Wrestling Writer, I had his figures as well. I think the only reason why I chose this figure instead of Ron Bass, because Ron Bass is terrible. You could say, well, it's just a Bruno Sammartino. Isn't Bruno Sammartino a usable figure? Absolutely. But here's the thing. An original figure compared to someone who decided to customize it and pop another head on it, it doesn't mean the same to me. I want each figure to be unique, to be original. And Ron Bass, I have very little knowledge of that character. So, and he's a criminal, so if I recall correctly, I think Ron Bass and his son got arrested for like bank robbery or some crazy stuff. Oh man. So that, and the fact that he came with an accessory, the hat, that's the only reason Ron Bass didn't make this list. But Ric Flair, they use the same Bruno Sammartino fighting pose. And another thing is, I love, you look at his face, the whole woo! That looks solid. But look at his face, though. It looks like his head is smushed in, And so that kind of kills the figure for me. I was using I was doing a Royal Rumble recently. BBA asked me to film some videos, from wrestling videos, and so I made another Royal Rumble match, and I put it on my camera. But it broke down in 2 videos. The first was like 6 minutes. I messed it up, and then I continued on in the second video, which was like an hour and 5 minutes, and I have no idea how to transfer that from the phone to the computer because it's I guess the file is too big, so it can't be read or something. But it's still saving on my phone, so I don't want to delete that, but it's taking up all my storage. And I use this Ric Flair, and I swear to God, even though you look at the head and everything looks like it's on there nice and tight, when I was wrestling with him, it kept feeling like his head was going to pop off. I'm like, okay, I got to eliminate this guy quickly. And now, let's just move on from Ric Flair. Mike Sharp. I kind of felt like when I first saw this was a Hercules Hernandez figure from the original LJN line. basically utilizing the same fighting pose. It's, I don't know. To me, it's just, I know a lot of LJNs are cartoony, but to me, I don't think anyone even tried on this one. The rubber is terrible. Like I said, the chest hair is non-existent. Rub some dirt on it, call it a day type of deal. The fighting pose is garbage. When you look at the face, like I said, it doesn't look human. It looks like a cartoon look. I can't picture Mike Sharp in my head, so I don't know if that would pass even for 80s technology and all that, but you go on like Etsy and you read the reviews and you see all these people want to, oh, I love my Mike Sharp figure. Thank you, Random Treasures. You knocked out of the ballpark. I'm like, dude. And I get it. A lot of this can't be blamed on Random Treasures directly. A lot of these come from Print Fury. He does resin figures, and I don't know how the folks at Random Treasures, how they kind of convert it to rubber, but this is not a good figure by any means. I have no idea humanly possible why anyone would buy this, says the guy that bought this. But hey, leave me alone. I got problems. So that's my excuse. Shoot, man. Foxer said it to me in a video I posted. He's like, I'm a completist. That's a perfect way to describe me when it comes to collections. So, not a good figure at all. No name recognition because I don't know this character. Horrible figure, terrible fighting pose. Doesn't look human. I honestly don't have any good things to say about this particular figure. Not worth it by one stretch of imagination. Ric Flair, even with the squashed head and everything, at least it's a Ric Flair head. And even though I don't like the Bruno Sammartino fighting pose, they do kind of alter it a little bit by swapping out like the open hand and giving him both closed fists. So that's nice. And, different color scheme than what you have with the blue trunks Ric Flair. So, yeah, Ric Flair is a much better figure. And in that regard, that means that Mike Sharp stays among the group of the worst figures ever made. I think this next one is pretty easy. Ivan Putski versus Roddy Piper. So, when I think about Roddy Piper, I always think about my favorite wrestlers of all time. I think the first 6 or so are pretty safe. For me, Hogan, Warrior, Macho Man have always been my top 3. Up until a few years ago when I started thinking about it, like who would I start putting number 4, 5, 6, etc. I kind of went with Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker at 4, 5, and 6. But who would actually fill in my top 10? Jim Duggan? Maybe. Yokozuna? Possibly. He didn't have the longest career that I would have liked. But British Bulldog is definitely up there. Possibly number 7, maybe number 8. I don't know. Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper is definitely a top 10 all-time favorite wrestler for me. I would probably go Piper 7 and Bulldog 8. Or, again, it could go either way. So I think that right there is pretty safe. The one thing I don't like about Roddy Piper's action figure is pose-based. I said before that LJN Series 1 produced the greatest playable fighting figures among the group. Series 6 being a very close second. But they also produced 3 of the worst figures of the line. In guys like Iron Sheik, in Jimmy Snuka, in Roddy Piper. Are they necessarily 1, 2, 3 as in the worst figures? Not necessarily, but I mean, out of a top 10, he could be like number 10. But the point is, it's just not a good figure. Thinness is, it's not, ultra thin or anything. It's thin enough, though. The right arm, you might be able to live with the right arm out the way it is. If you had something more with the left arm, and, I don't know, I talked about when I first, because I didn't have LJNs as a kid, I always talk about those initial Royal Rumble matches I made to kind of get the feel and playability for the figures. And I always kept Roddy Piper in the match crazy long. And I think we do that a lot with the figures that we don't enjoy, because we want to kind of like force ourselves to enjoy a particular figure a little bit more. Like if I'm using a Hulk Hogan Series 1, I already know it's a perfect figure. I don't have to play with that figure to know it's perfect. But maybe based on pose, I could feel differently. I just never have. But like Greg Valentine, I was never influenced or looked at Greg Valentine as a special figure. It wasn't until I started using it, I'm like, man, this is an absolute perfect figure. Like, one of the most enjoyable to use. Roddy Piper, unfortunately, I never felt that way about this figure. I love the character. His figure's bad. Nice accessory, but Ivan Putski. I think Annette hates me for this one. A while back when 80s Revolution was doing his review. I use the word review loosely. He doesn't really do a review. I would love to hear general honesty when he does his videos, but it's an advertisement, pretty much. So most of the time, because I'm always on Etsy every day, eBay, Mercari, so I always see these figures before they come out, or I see these figures before anyone ever makes any videos about them, most of the time. Sometimes I'll see the video from Jason first, you know, what have you, but, you know, he was really hyping up this figure, and I'm like, meh, 2 out of 10. And to be honest, when I said 2 out of 10, I thought I was being overly generous. Kind of like Mike Sharp, I think that this could be one of the worst figures ever created. You know, possible winner of this tournament, maybe. So, you know, Ned says, well, you know, why do you dislike it? You know, why don't you like the pose? That's exactly what he's famous for doing. Again, my argument remains, these aren't statues. These are playable wrestling action figures. I get it, you're going to collectors, but I want these all to be a certain way. And I'm not the only person, and that's, you know, it'd be one thing if like one fan had a gripe about it, but I'm pretty sure 90% of the people out there pretty much share my feelings, and when it comes to play pose and all that. You don't have to wrestle these to want to see something more. If you were charging me $50 for a resin figure that's non-movable, fine. But $150 for this is severely overpriced. And again, that's why I kind of turned back to big rubber guys. $50 for some amazing figures compared to $150 for... No. I love the Ivan Putski Legends of Professional Wrestling figures. He's got a couple of my favorites. But I think this is another one of those wrestlers that were before my time. You know, 60s, 70s wrestler. I believe into the 80s. I don't think he was around the 90s. His hands are even in closer than even Harley Race, original LJN. So, I mean, I can't even pretend. I can't even pretend to fight this. I mean, look at this. I have no idea. This is just so bad. I think if his arms were positioned the right way, this could have been a decent figure. A head, I mean, is that an Ivan Putski face? I don't think so. To me, again, it's just way too cartoony to the point where it's just basically a generic person, right? Think of the referees from LJN. They're not molded after, you know, Dave and Earl Hebner. They're just generic faces, and I think that's what you get from these. So not a good figure, not playable, you know, offset on the boots, adequate, right? But I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Roddy Piper is much better. So, of course, Ivan Putski is moving on to round 2. He will continue to compete for my least favorite LJN figure. Alright, last one consists of... So this one was actually very Random Treasures heavy. Bob Backlund versus Tito Santana. I could have actually gone with both Purple Tito and White Trunks Tito, Strikeforce Tito in this tournament, but I decided to just do one. That way I was able to add an extra wrestler and keep the numbers even. We'll start with Tito Santana. There are, some folks here and there that I watch, and whenever they talk about, their childhood and wrestlers that they grew up playing with and whatnot, I think because Tito Santana was a good guy, and, he was like battling, who was it, Greg Valentine, a heel, and going back and forth for like the Intercontinental Championship and whatnot, and kind of like doing his own little DDT, and to me, I always feel like the DDT is special for Ric Flair, right? Greg Valentine, I'm like, nah. Tito Santana, absolutely not. So there's certain characters that you associate with the figure 4 leg lock, and I like it for Ric Flair. Don't care about other characters. And but yeah, they harp on the Tito Santana figure, and go-to figure, always used for play. I'm like, as an adult, I cannot enjoy this figure not one bit. This is an absolute trash figure. I say that we all have our own opinions, and that, that's okay. Anyone that thinks that this is a good figure, I would just say you're wrong. No, but seriously though, when you look at his body, super thin figure, which is crazy. His arm, theoretically, based on the arms, you would think that this would be a perfect figure for playing, but it really isn't. Left arm is like super low. Right arm is adequate. I mean, the way his arms are way out there, so you can't do a perfect body slam. The way that the left, uppercut slap or something. I don't know. I'm trying to look at a way that if it were like this or something, kind of separate, maybe one arm higher than the other. This could be a decent figure. You can overlook the extra skinniness of the figure with a good fighting pose, but the arms are way out there and just not enjoyable. Not a very playable figure. When I started my Rumble, at the time back in 2022, I had 2 collections. I actually had 2 collections for LJN. I had 2 collections for Hasbro. Why? Because every time I bought a bundle of figures, 5 figures, 6 figures, 10, 12, 20, there may be only 1 or 2 figures in that lot that I actually needed. And so I'd end up with all these duplicates. So I almost completed a second collection of LJN. And I actually did complete a second collection of Hasbro. And I tried selling those Hasbros all in one single bundle for a few $1,000s. Which, when you actually think about it, I should have charged $6,000 or $7,000, because when you think of price of a purchase price, shipping, taxes, so I think I may have had $5,000, but I constantly lowered it down to $4,200, $3,800. So people were getting a great deal. After about 2 years of being up, I'm like, nah, forget this. I just started selling them as individual series as opposed to selling them as one complete. But I only wrestled the figures I had duplicates of, and just like Roddy Piper, this is one of those figures I used a lot because I wanted to get a better feel for him, and I just not once ever got to a point where I felt like this was enjoyable. So, here's the tough part. Bob Backlund is straight trash. I have 0 positives about this figure. If I did have to give one good thing, it's that he's got a B. Brian Blair fighting pose. B. Brian Blair, compared to what you get from Tito Santana, much, much better. The fighting pose may have been actually adequate, but there are a lot of problems I have, starting with the head. Is that Bob Backlund? Bob Backlund, I could picture him. I watched Bob Backlund in the early 90s into the mid 90s, so yeah. I don't think that's Bob Backlund, though, at least not in my opinion. Hair is super orange, brownish. I don't like it. One of the main issues I have is the skin tone, which is absolutely horrible. And to furthermore, the rubber. This has got to be the cheapest, most pathetic excuse of rubber I've ever seen. Random Treasures might have created the worst LJN in history with this figure. If this figure survives and it's Tito Santana that moves on, I think the only thing that saves this figure is that B. Brian Blair fighting pose. Because overall quality, it's just not there. Well, people could say, well, it's expertly painted. You know, I can go to any customizer and, you know, pay them to paint my figure. That doesn't mean much. I talked about Brother Love. Brother Love from Ram Treasures is one of my favorite pieces from them. But I also feel like they had very similar rubber to this. But because he's got that jacket and pants over the body, you don't see all of this. You see that paint. Now, if you turn this into like a mid-90s, you know, managers type Bob Backlund, you know, put him in a suit, I would have probably loved this figure. Because the pose is decent, and you wouldn't see the skin and all that. But people, they want their playable 1980s LJN era figures or characters, and Bob Backlund, I never had a problem with Bob Backlund being made. I thought that was brilliant. 100% agreed, Bob Backlund deserved his own figure. Just not this one. This one is not good. I think that under any other circumstance, these two figures could potentially be the last two standing as the worst LJNs ever made. But I'm going to classify Tito Santana as being slightly better than Bob Backlund. And I think it's at least has a lot to do with the rubber. So, Bob Backlund moves on to round 2. Still in competition for the worst action figure or worst LJN ever made. Well, that is your 4 matchups for today. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, my criticism of some of these figures, I'm hoping I'm not insulting anyone with that. But it is called my least favorite LJN tournament for a reason, right? It's because I don't like certain figures for particular reasons, so. And after all, name recognition, all that doesn't really play into it. They're all figure tournaments, so you're going off the best figure and the worst figure in this case. So, alright, I am going to close the video here, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time. Thanks, everyone.